I couldn't be more humbled and happier to be joined by CEO and chairman of multiple technology companies and longtime friend of SBT, Brian Wong. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Justin. Pleasure to be here this morning.
Well, I know our conversation will take us in a lot of different directions, and hopefully at some point we'll be able to talk about one of the more recent boards that you were appointed to and chairman of, Quantum Brilliance, and we'll probably talk about some of our old workings at Primarion
Yeah,
and at Lemarion. So with that being said, I love asking technology leaders this one leading question in the beginning. What first drew you to engineering, and when did you know that you wanted to become an engineer, Brian?
that's a great question because I actually had two career paths. I should start out by saying that my dad is an engineer and my grandfather was an engineer. But my father was born abroad in Guangzhou, China, immigrated, went to Berkeley, got a civil engineering degree. And because his father was a citizen, he was able to get a job at Skunk Works. And he worked on the U-2 and the SR-71. I didn't know this until much later when they were declassified, but I was just blown away. You're a kid and you see these pictures of it. If people don't know what an SR-71 is, it's the Blackbird. It's a fantastic looking plane. And everyone knows the U-2, there's a rock band named after them. But he was an engineer's engineer and he just did everything, took apart HVACs, cars, fixed his own TVs. And I just got used to that, having tools around. And if I ask Dad, how does that work? He'd go, well, let's take it apart. And if it wasn't practical, there was a book literally called How Things Work. And he would make me look it up and read it. So I grew up that way. And when I was 12, I actually went to community college. My mom enrolled me in a course to build and design a radio. So I got to design a radio. And then when I got in rock and roll, listening to Zeppelin, I built what was called a light organ, which was this giant box that was 5 feet tall. I built the box out of woodwork myself, had electronics to do bass, treble, and mid-range. And as it was blasting out, there was a diffraction screen that would make a star pattern with a three-dimensional Christmas lights. And my friends would just come over and we would just rock out to this. So that was growing up. And naturally, I majored in engineering, but my mom wanted me to go to med school. So I was a pre-med and a mechanical engineer, which I did really well because I took things apart. But then microelectronics was coming on. This was in the 70s. And so I just fell in love with how can you cram all this stuff, into a little microchip. So I switched to double E, asked my dad, and he says, yeah, I think that's the next wave. So I graduated with a double E, and along the way I was, interning at Xerox. I was taking my pre-med courses. I got on the waiting list for medical school. And when I graduated, TRW made me an offer to work on gallium arsenide circuits. And so I loved it. And then 3 months in, I got a call. Hey, you're off the waiting list. You're admitted to medical school, right? So what am I going to do? So I had the sad thing of calling my mom and saying, I've decided to be an engineer and stay, at TRW because I actually find it fascinating. And they eventually paid for my grad school as well. So you could say it was in my DNA or, my nurture growing up, but I'm a very curious person. And, it satiated my curiosity to learn new things and build things forever to this day.
Wow. Well, you know what? I think the entire industry is thankful that you were waitlisted on the medical school list. But now you went beyond building products, and as you made your way through your engineering career, you started building companies. Was there a moment that you realized you wanted to be involved with building more than just technology, but building companies?
Absolutely. I can kind of remember the moments it started crystallizing. So at TRW, my job was an engineer, and eventually I led a whole department of 120 people. And we would do a lot of R&D on advanced technologies. And another part of my department actually built payloads for classified satellites. The R&D part, I was really good at winning DARPA programs and Air Force, but if it didn't go anywhere, kind of felt empty to do research for research's sake. And then on the satellite side, it'd take 10 years to build a chip and get it launched. But along the time, at that time, the greatest technology advances I still I still think to this day we're done in the aerospace sector because of the advanced funding and work we were doing. But gradually, I saw a lot of my friends leave. The Broadcom founders were my coworker. The Peregrine Semiconductor CEO, Jim Cable, was from my company. Impinj founders worked for me, the RFID company I later worked for. So to satiate that, I started having this idea that I could take all this R&D that's funded by the government and turn it into products that we could sell commercially. Because I understood by then how companies work. If you're public, they would invest heavily. If they're private, they would raise money, do R&D, development, product development. I go, well, all of that is already done. So I started pitching to Nokia in the transition from analog to digital communications for cell phones and base stations. And our chips are really good at that. And to the point where they were being prototyped for base stations. And in one of our gallium arsenide technologies was really good for mobile phone handsets, much more efficient for the Nokia 6190. So we didn't know anything about commercial, how to bring products to market. I found out the hard way. I tried, I learned, spent a lot of time doing that. And it was a kind of a thankless job. But Bob Van Breskirk and I formed this organization. He later went on to be CEO of Stanford Microelectronics, and we call it, commercial gas products. And eventually, we licensed it instead of selling the chips to a little tiny startup called RF Micro Devices. And when they went public, it was worth $1 billion. Our share was worth $1 billion. But if we had just sold wafers, it would have been like $30 million worth of wafers. So when I saw that, I realized that this technology that was locked up in TRW, which we monetized by, getting payloads, was worth in a separate company $1 billion. That really woke me up that, it's not, you got to build a company that's focused, that's specific with this technology. And, instead of being buried as a chip designer in a giant aerospace company. So that's when I really decided I wanted to build a company just like that experience I saw. And especially after seeing Nick and Henry form, Broadcom and have success. So opportunity knocked, and I took it with my first startup at Primarion left in '99 to do that. Not good timing in the beginning of 2000.
Well, you obviously did something right. And as CEO of Primarion, what were some of the biggest lessons that you learned, both in leading the company day to day and through its acquisition by Infineon, that you carried into subsequent roles?
Well, being in a startup is a lot different than working in a big company. And Primarion was formed actually, Bill Pullman, who was the father of the 8086 from Intel, called me one night at TRW and told me he was doing a startup. And that's how it started. He said his idea was to take great aerospace engineers from Hughes, TRW, primarily those two companies, and Raytheon, and have those engineers build the next generation of technologies to keep Moore's law on track. That was all it took to raise money back then. A famous guy from Intel. So, at Primarion, we had to learn, us aerospace guys, how to figure out what we learned from before to keep and how to move 10 times faster in the startup. And actually, it was a good experience because unlike someone who's never been through a very robust product development cycle, we kind of knew how to streamline, what to miss. If you've never done it, it's pretty hard to figure out what to streamline, right? But probably the lessons learned because I became CEO in the third year after we kind of went in the wrong direction and overspent. Number one, watch your cash runway. I think we were probably spending around 3 million a month in an early revenue company. When the crash happened, first there was a 9/11, and then there was the dot-com crash. The company really wasn't prepared, right? If you've only gone through good times. So watch your cash runway because it takes a lot longer to raise money than it does to spend it. And we had grown to 200 people. So that other thing is leverage, partner to punch above your weight. We didn't need to do everything ourselves. So I streamlined that company way down. But partnering to punch above your weight is a big deal. Instead of, designing all your boards or design next level assembly, partner with somebody who can do it. And even better, don't pay them, but, give them, rights to manufacture it or rights to be an exclusive supplier and let them do the engineering and be your partner in a true sense of the word. And the third is customers. Most people think, just get customers. Not all customers are good customers. We learned the hard way, right? Some customers, you can kill yourself. You can bent your pick. They will lead you to spend all your cash, and you'll find at the end of the day they selected somebody else to go, into an end product. So the second thing I learned about customers is they all say they want bleeding edge technologies, the big ones, IBM, Cisco, who I was selling into for power management. But they also want to reduce risk, and they wanted a second source. And I said, well, it doesn't work. How can you have bleeding edge technology? And in our case, it was all power management was analog at the time. We invented digital power management, where you could tune, use digital filters. You could have a graphical user interface and make fine adjustments. You could have telemetry, but it was new and there's no second source. And if we financially went under, this big X series server was in the market, that would be a disaster. So they go, I don't know what to tell you. We want it, but you need a second source. So I went to another company that had 30% market share, and I created a competitor. I licensed them the rights to make our chip, and that right created a second source. But to layer that on, they had to pay us. So I got some non-dilutional funding. Second thing is I realized they probably had a lot better supply chain. So I learned what a letter of authorization is at the time. I got them to tell the fab to sell us the wafers at their price. And so all of a sudden we were paying $1,300 a wafer for these power management chips. And it was like sub $1,000 what they were paying. But that would put us in a more even keel. So at first it was kind of nonsensical to the board to have your biggest enemy who's way behind in doing analog where we're doing digital. But it made the company. It really enabled us to have a second source, have much lower COGS. And so it was kind of outside the box thinking, I think, that to solve problems, right? Instead of just linear, well, I'm going to convince IBM and Cisco that they don't need a second source. Forget it, right? You're not going to convince them of that. So that's in the whole category of choose your customers carefully, but if you hit a roadblock, figure a way to get around it. So I can say I've fired more customers than I've acquired pretty quickly when I, figured out the sales team had signed up for something that would take too long, too much, too far away from what we were doing. Um, and that probably leads to the fourth one, which is don't hire a sales team too early. They will drive your, they will drive your engineering team crazy. Well, if you only do this, we can sell it, right? But we're not doing that, So hire them at the right time and use marketing and biz dev in the early days to get the right strategic customer that's bought in to the technology, the risk, and what you can deliver as a value prop.
Well, that's one of the things that I've always loved about you, Brian, is that you were an innovator from a design perspective. You brought that same innovative mindset and outside the box mindset to your role as CEO. And now, if we go on to the next progression and in your role on boards, so you've had experience on almost a dozen boards. Let's first talk about some of the common mistakes that you see board members and founders make in working together, and how those might be able to be avoided.
Boards are an interesting thing. They're like a living organism, and a lot of first-time founders they'll just raise money from wherever and throw together a board. And a good percentage of the time, they could be dysfunctional, and it's really hard to build a company with a dysfunctional board. I think we've all experienced it, right? And it's not like you could just go, well, I'm just going to reconstitute the board. Not that easy. So you got to really think about making a functional board. But a company's a roller coaster, and every founder has to decide, what should I only tell them the good things? Should I try to figure out how to solve a problem and then tell them, oh, nothing because I solved it, or tell them there was a problem and I solved it? And that's kind of this fine line, right? As a living organism, boards are only as good as the data that they get. They don't want every piece of data. That's your job as a CEO. But they need timely data on major items, and the whole idea is to help. I mean, that's their job, right? They have two hats. I have one hat as independent. Their hats are represent their fund, and then the second hat is fiduciary duty to represent the shareholders. I'm very fortunate as an independent. I only represent the shareholders, right? So I'm not conflicted, and many times I'm the person that they go to try to make an unconflicted decision. But let's get back to the data. I think a CEO and a founder needs to tell the board when there is a problem earlier rather than not, propose a bunch of options and solutions that they can pursue, get the board to guide, hopefully they have a lot more experience. I mean, generally, I'm with first or second time founders, and I can say, well, there's other ways to do this. Have you thought about this? And it's not really prescriptive. It's more, here's a bunch of other tools. Let me open my tool chest, right? And let's work together. It's collaborative, but I think it gets to the point where founders sometimes are overtelling and there's too much information. The boards are very busy. They have many other items to deal with. They can't sort through the data, or they don't tell them enough information, or they tell them too late. There's a problem and we went into default and I'm trying to solve it. Just FYI. It's like, no, right? That's kind of too late. So on the board side, what's the appropriate level of management oversight? You don't want to micromanage. So how does the board decide? They decide on the experience level of the team, right? The team's inexperienced, it's one level. If there's not, it's another. So I think I come at it from both sides since I've been on every role. Um, that's my kind of experiences.
Well, and now you've also, talking a little bit about funding, you've helped multiple companies acquire significant funding. Can you share a story of why you pursued your FINRA licenses and how that changed your perspective on raising capital?
Yeah, so I have typically only used bankers for M&A. And I was pretty good at fundraising, which is not a fun thing, by the way. Most CEOs, we love strategy, we love building companies, and if you're fundraising, it's all in, and you really can't do what you love, right? So um, it's this necessary thing to fuel the fire, and if you're not good at it, doesn't matter how good a team or anything you have. So I've never needed them until Innovate. Innovate was a battery company, silicon anode battery company, and we were trying to do this was after the subprime mortgage crisis. So I had just sold D2IO to Intercell in July of 2008, and in September of 2008, the subprime mortgage crisis happened. And so I had golden handcuffs for a couple years, but I was itching to leave and do another company. And I quickly found that they were not really financing hard tech and semis, but they were funding solar and batteries. So I did a battery company, Innovate. I was the first CEO there, and the U.S. wasn't really investing heavily, but China was investing super heavily in batteries and solar. And I had gone to China a lot for supply chain and factories, but not fundraising. So I hired Jack Bell from Pantech Partners, and I had interviewed a bunch of other bankers that wasted my time. They thought setting up 100 meetings for me was great, but I didn't want to be as the client finding out that they don't have any money, their fund is out, or they don't know anything about the space, or they just invested in my arch enemy competitor. That's the job of the banker, and Jack did that excellently, and he took me to China and Korea, Japan. We lot of areas, geos that I had not tapped into. So we were successful. We had BlackBerry and Lenovo investing, and he thought I did a really good job at creating a pitch deck and effectively telling the story. Because as he went on and had other founders, he would call on me throughout my career to help with this pitch deck or help tune it, or can you call the CEO and consult on some. So then in the mid 2016s, he said, hey, I really want to have you not do another job. And after I sold another company, Lumentum to Lumentum, and join me, as a banker. And my wife would joke, you just told me the least favorite thing of your job as CEO is fundraising. So you want to just do this all the time for other people. And I thought about it. So I started, taking some tests and decided to do, another gig and then another gig. And then finally in 2020, he asked me again, and I decided to join Impinj as Chief Product Officer. So after I left Impinj and kind of retired and decided I don't want to be CEO anymore in 2022, I'm done. I've done enough. I want to give back. I started taking a break and realizing I wanted to help startups in three ways. I wanted to be a board director, which I'd already been maybe 5, 6 times. I wanted to be a consultant to help them in areas outside of board director. And then I could help them raise funds or even sell the company, but I needed a license. So I agreed at that point to take the SIE 63, 82, 79, got all that done. So now I have all these tools to help, startups in three ways. And a lot of them, they overlap. I'm in the board, and then when they need to raise, we raise. Or I'm a consultant, and then they ask me to join the board. And so I've been registered for 3 years. We are a boutique, which is what I like. We only have about 8 people, a couple of managing directors, me and Jack, and we only focus on areas that we know well. For me, it's semi, batteries, AI, robotics, and hopefully, going forward, quantum as well. So pretty frontier tech, deep tech. And I found I can communicate with my client really well because I've been in their shoes, right? So I come at it from a little different viewpoint. So everything is, whether becoming an accidental CEO or, an accidental banker at the age of, 60, it's just what seemed the right thing to do at the time, which is unconventional, right?
One of the common themes that I hear that's woven into all of this story is your desire to be an ecosystem builder, and to be able to really build relationships and to give back. Is there a company that you're, or a couple companies that you're either serving on the board for or consulting in right now that you're in particular excited about?
Well, I'm super excited about my newest board, which is Chairman of Quantum Brilliance. Previously I was in the AI of Lumerion, which you helped us with hiring great teams. Justin, thank you very much. That was pretty much frontier tech 4 years ago when I joined Lumerion, which is an AI company that was making a chip and software stack that pivoted to being able to make a really great software stack for the core. I think the next frontier technology is quantum. And one thing I'm excited about is technology for technology's sake only works for a short while, right? People invest in AI, anything AI, and all of a sudden, they realize you got to make money at it. You need to apply to AI. I think quantum is right now in the exploratory phase. There's a lot of scientists that say lock us in a room for 10 years, give us lots of money. I mean, lots of money, and we'll emerge in mid 2030s and have a fault tolerant quantum computer. I'm super excited about quantum brilliance because we can do this at room temperature where everyone else needs pretty much a cryo cooled technology. There's a lot of different technologies. And this is on diamond, nitrogen vacancy diamond. And because it's small and we can make it low cost like a chip and we don't need cryo cooling, we can actually go to the edge and we can actually do it sooner, and then we can actually have revenue in quantum sensing within a couple years. And so I feel like it's a perfect fit because we have 60 plus PhDs. We have about 100 people in multiple countries, and they're great at what they do. And I can add a layer of, how to get a product manufactured, take it to market, product market fit. They have a great team that I actually feel we can position the company to be the center of an ecosystem, and that means figuring out where you are in the value chain, right? We're not going to make a computer or an end box, but like Intel was in the days of the computer, they could have brought out a box, a beige box, but they didn't. They created an ecosystem to punch above their weight. Once again, that theme. So making quantum chips and having an ecosystem of sensor partners, board partners, computing partners, manufacturing partners, by saying this is the lockstep where we're going to be, what milestone, where each of our partners need to be to build this entire ecosystem of diamond quantum devices together. I think that's what's really exciting to me is not just building a company, but building an ecosystem around the company. And I end up spending a lot of time because I'm just so excited about the opportunity that we can provide.
Well, I think that that's a company I definitely bet on because you're there. And one of the things that I've had a front row seat at is seeing at Primarion and at D2. One of the things that you're incredibly gifted at is being able to build world class teams, and even at Lemarion. And looking at your career across hardware, software companies, what patterns have you seen emerge that enable scaling successful teams versus those companies that don't and ultimately end up stalling?
Technology is not going to go to market by itself. I think it's all about the people and the team, right? And whatever strategy you're going to have, you're going to hit a speed bump, and you're going to rely on that team to navigate the speed bump. So the first thing is great people attract more great people. So that initial core team, which multiple companies have relied on people like you, Justin, to find those core great people. It's super critical because it builds. The first thing they go is who else is there, right? Who's joining? You got 7 people. Who are those 7 people? The second thing about the team is you have to understand how to motivate them, and everybody's motivated differently. Some people want to just build a great company and make a big impact. Some people are financially motivated. They want a lot of options. But what they all have in common, they should have in common, is a diversity of experiences. So we can attack problems. Great leadership and the funding, so the team doesn't need to worry about where's my next paycheck going to come to, right? So I think leadership is critical. Select leaders on the team, because as a CEO, I can't manage 100 people or 70 people. And leadership is so critical because you need to be able to explain and communicate why they should be doing what they are. It's not just do this, don't ask questions, just get this done by tomorrow, right? No, understand their problems, let them understand why it's important that they really, really just put in the extra effort to get to that goal. And it's that leadership and understanding that helps the team. So it's all those combinations of things. And when any one of these things, even lack of funding, a great team can only be motivated so long by a leader without pay, right? And I won't deny it either. I've had to take pay cuts and convince a team to take pay cuts, and then guess what? We got funding, everyone got paid, we sold the company, we got profitable, we sold the company, right? So it's also having a track record that they can believe in. That I've never had to shut down a company for lack of funding, and people know that, right? And so they also know that when it's only 10% full, the glass, we got to figure out how to get that full again together. So yeah, team is everything, and thanks to people like you, we can pull together great teams.
So you've mentioned people like me, and that there are founders who don't believe in using recruiting firms. That the people should want to come there no matter what. What what specifically has driven you in the direction of using recruiting firms over the decades, from Primarion to D2 to Lemarion and beyond?
Well, you're absolutely right. People have to want to come to the company. The executive recruiter is not going to make them want to come to the company, but to identify, select, oh, I know this person at Qualcomm or, at NVIDIA, or that is really good and they could be open to this opportunity, and be able to get in there and pitch that opportunity so that I can have the opportunity as a founder or CEO to explain that's what we're looking for, right? And then have people like you or other recruiters explain to us. I've delved in. I understand what motivates this person. He may not be telling you, or she may not be telling you, because everyone is motivated differently, right? And it's really identifying, having that insight, of what we need. And so the flip side of that is it never works if the recruiter doesn't understand my business. They don't understand my business. It's just like a banker putting me in front of the wrong investors. We'll get just hundreds of people that don't fit. I think it's really finding, just like a lawyer or banker, the right recruiter that has the ability to understand my needs, understand the ecosystem, and who might be interested in joining this team, and then time and speed. Right? I could probably find the right person in a year, but I need them like tomorrow. Right? And so, time is everything in a startup as well, and money is time. Right? If you have to take a year to build a team, and you're spending money during that year, but you're not able to do enough, you're actually having this run rate issue with trying to get what you need done as fast as possible, as efficiently as possible.
Absolutely. What's a piece of advice you wish somebody had given you when you were first starting out in your first CEO role?
Yeah, there's really nothing like doing it. I mean, I watched the CEO, so I was an accidental CEO at Primarion, and we had a restructuring, and they called all of us in the office and they said, well, CEO, sales, they've exited. We'd like you to take the interim CEO role. I go, oh, I've watched. It's not the same. Pretty lonely. Everyone's looking at you. And I initially thought I have to have all the answers. Well, you don't. The other thing is I thought as a CEO, it'd be this great thing where you go, you give talks, you go to customers, you shake hands, you close the deal. It is really the most thankless job, right? Whatever's not done, team's too busy. They're doing all these other things. We don't have an ops. We don't have anyone, figuring out how to get this supply chain in place. They're too busy. Okay, well, I'm ops this month. I'm gonna fly around the world and solve that supply chain issue. Hey, we need a partner that's a customer, and we're too busy. So you got to just fill in the blanks, sweep the floors. I remember going in. Everyone's busy at night buying snacks, putting them in the kitchen to make sure the kitchen is stocked. That's kind of the thing you do. What I would say the lessons learned is some of the hard lessons is that understanding how to motivate people. They're not all the same. You just treat everyone the same. Hey, I'm gonna give you more options. No, some people are motivated with, give me a harder role. Some people aren't motivated, but giving me a harder role. The second thing is taking too long to fire somebody. I think we all are, to a greater or lesser extent, have that weakness because it's not a great thing. We don't go around like I have fired 200 people in my life. It's really hard, especially when you become friends. And so the ability to figure out and execute fast enough to get someone in the right role on your team or the right role on someone else's team, I think is critical, and it's probably my biggest weakness that I had to learn through the years because it's a drain on the team when someone's not pulling their weight and everyone else is, and they're like, well, they're still here. Why do I need to, you know, pull their weight too? So I think one of the things I've learned is taking taking the time to really dig in and remove someone from the team at the right time and not wait another month or 2 months or 3 months. That's probably one of the least fun things I've learned, and I've felt firsthand the issues of waiting too long to fire somebody. The company had gone down, the morale had gone down, and boom, hiring the right person again, the team, kind of reconstituted itself. So that's hard.
Absolutely. And as we wind it down here, two quick final questions. Are there any trends or patterns that you're seeing in strategic capital investing, in particular in frontier technologies? And why do you think founders should pay very close attention to them?
Well, first of all, having a strategic invest in a frontier tech, I think is critical in fundraising. Frontier tech, I can define it as emerging scientific breakthroughs at the intersection of worldwide application to solve problems in a new way. Whether it's AI, robotics, autonomy, quantum. It's really too hard for investors to understand. And a lot of investors will easily understand it if you're in the market. Oh, well, people, if you have 5 million revenue, obviously your tech works. But in the early days, that's not the case. So it's strategics that they go, oh, we see value in this. We understand it. We don't have these patents or expertise, but it can transform our business. So number one is to get strategic investors to crystallize around with financial investors that feel a lot more comfortable that this technology has legs, is product market fit, and someone, it could be a customer, a supplier, someone who's a strategic, put their money where their mouth is and invest it. I think number two is how frontier tech can disrupt your own developments, whether it's your company or strategics. One of my companies I'm advising in November, when Claude coding came out, they found they were able to do in 2 weeks what used to code take 6 months to do. That changed everything. It changed how they made promises to their strategic customers. It changed how much they could accomplish, changed their forecasts, So I think it's not tech for tech's sake. And as such, figuring out where you are in a value chain and having strategic investors help fill in the blanks with, I'm here in a value chain and the product and market product is here. How do I get from here to here by filling in with strategic partners? I have almost always gotten strategic investment from really good strategic partners, probably way over 2 dozen strategic investments from 30, 40 plus strategic partnerships that I've formed. It's a good way to tell the world and get them more involved as well. I found when you're working with an engineering team and they know that their CEO has invested in my company, you're going to get a lot more mind share than another company that's working with the same team.
Absolutely. Last question for you, Brian. If we're to look down the horizon 5, 10 years, what legacy do you want to leave?
Well, yeah, I've been really fortunate to be at inflection points and have teams with me. So at this point, there's there's a lot of my teams in the wild forming their own companies, making their own mark, and I'm so happy, right, to see this. It's like over 40 years. These are all the people who have been parts of my teams, which include my customer teams I work closely with, and the ideas that we formed. They're out there. The second thing is the ecosystems that we've been able to create. I mean, when I moved to Austin to be CEO of D2 Audio, it was a really early days for me. It was '05, and it was blossoming. And I thought, how can I make this an ecosystem with the tech, the tolerance for risk? There's a big university, but to build a company, there needs more. So I became chairman of Austin Technology Council. It's a nonprofit. We had about 200 companies, right? So we created that ecosystem to help founders with finance, banking, accounting, with sponsors like E&Y, Wilson Sonsini, etc. And so that's a legacy that continues today, the Austin Technology Council. And then finally, I've been on boards of universities, engineering departments, both UC Davis engineering department as well as UT Austin. And I think what I could add there was, the curricula, how can we make sure that the product, which is the graduating students, really, really have the right skills, hard and soft, to really make an impact on industries, right? And so they value that industrial guidance. And so I've donated a lot of my time to these nonprofits, these university boards over time to kind of give back in a way and prepare a whole new generation to continue this. And that if I can achieve all this, I'd be, very blessed.
Well, I will close with this. I'm going to restate something I said in a different way. The entire industry is blessed because you've been a part of it. I've had a front row seat to your humble nature, your willingness to give back, and your building of an ecosystem outside of just a company. You've always focused on building an ecosystem, being a good partner while bringing in good partners. And thinking back to the very first moments of our conversation, I'd also like to say, I'm sure your dad's very proud, and I imagine that your mom would be too. So I hope we get to do this again, Brian.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks so much. You're making me blush, but I appreciate the time to talk to you and the time to be able to explore these themes with you. Have a great one.
You as well.